He also points to 1 Kings 19, and this is the story of when God speaks to Elijah on Mount Horeb in a still small voice. And here are Greg's words about how God speaks to us in reference to the story. He writes, quote, "Occasionally he, God, will communicate thrillingly through dreams, visions, and audible voices, as he did with the apostle Peter on the rooftop in Joppa. But mostly he will speak quietly in a still small voice, as he did with Elijah on Mount Carmel, sounding surprisingly ordinary, as he did when the boy Samuel confused his voice for that of the old man in the room next door," unquote. Now, I'll address his interpretation about the story of Samuel next, but now let's consider his use of the story of Elijah on Mount Horeb. And I'll note that in that quote, Greg says that this incident occurred on Mount Carmel. It was actually Mount Horeb. It was Elijah's showdown with the false prophets of Baal that occurred on Mount Carmel. But let's look at the story. I'm going to read the entire chapter 19 because the context is crucial to interpreting this passage. And chapter 19 picks up after Elijah defeated hundreds of false prophets, and Ahab, the king of Israel, is upset about this, and he tells his wicked wife, Queen Jezebel, what Elijah had done. And so here's chapter 19, quote, "Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, 'So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow.' Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, 'It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers.' And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, 'Arise and eat.' And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, 'Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you.' And he arose and ate and drank, and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He said, 'I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.' And he said, 'Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord.' And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and went out, and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He said, 'I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.' And the Lord said to him, 'Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him.' So he departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak upon him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, "Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you." And he said to him, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" And he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. Unquote. I may have mispronounced a couple of those names there, but the reason that I read that entire chapter to you is so that you could see all that was going on there in the historical context of when God spoke to Elijah in a low whisper. So many people like Greg quote 1 Kings 19:12, or sometimes often they'll quote verses 11 and 12 in support of their teachings about hearing God's voice. So they quote just these two verses. Quote, "And he, the Lord, said, Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper." Unquote. So you can see how, as someone quotes just those verses out of context, they can easily be misused to make it seem like this is providing a model for how God regularly speaks to his people, that he does so through a still small voice or a whisper, as Greg, the word he uses. The New King James Version and the King James Version both referred to a still small voice, while other translations will use the word like whisper or low whisper. I think some say gentle whisper. But however that's translated, many people who promote these teachings about hearing God's voice will take just those verses out of context and use them to support their teachings that the way God regularly speaks to his people is through an inaudible whisper. But when you read the larger context, it becomes very difficult to use this passage this way to support those teachings. It's difficult to apply a passage to us and claim that it provides a model for us and how we are supposed to seek to hear from God regularly today, when the circumstances of the story, the historical context, are all so very different than ours. Think about it. We're not prophets, let alone prophets who had just taken part in a high-stakes battle against false prophets to turn God's specially chosen nation away from idolatry and toward the worship of the one true God. We don't have angels appear to us a couple times to personally defeat us and care for us. And we don't travel to Mount Sinai to speak with God. Mount Sinai is another name for Mount Horeb, to speak with him, where he sends a storm and an earthquake, and then gives us instructions to anoint kings and prophets, because that's what God said to Elijah when he got his attention with the low whisper. He then proceeded to give him instructions to anoint kings and to anoint Elisha as a prophet to replace himself, Elijah. And so for some reason, people who use this story to support teachings about hearing God's voice bypass these not so minor differences and the actual point of the whisper to give Elijah instructions that would lead to a changeover of the spiritual and political leadership of the nation of Israel and the eradication of Baal worship. And they just skip over all that and they grasp onto the part about God speaking to Elijah in a still small voice or in a whisper. And they use that to try to argue that God regularly speaks to us and whispers today about things as mundane as whether we should take a day off work or what color shirt we should wear, as I showed that Pete Greg teaches in the last episode. I showed that. So go back to that episode to see that. But the way that God spoke to Elijah wasn't even normative back then at the time God spoke to Elijah, because not everyone was a prophet. And it's clear when you read the story that it's presented a way that shows that the way God spoke to Elijah even then was extraordinary. And it even took Elijah by surprise.